Hey, what's up, y'all? And welcome to the Schooner Pod. This is your host for this week, Jamison Maxwell, and I'm joined with every week Ty. And then as a co-host today, Bobby's on the road to Austin spring game week to spend the week in Longhornville. Is there any explanation that he can keep his Sooner card after this, Ty?
No, I don't see a justifiable. Anyone who doesn't attend the spring game should automatically have their Schooner card revoked.
Okay, for the record, it is for an OU wedding, so that should help offset a little bit of it. So I don't think it can be too hard on me, but I get it. We'll be holding it down, like right in the heart of Texas, doing our best for sure. But Jamison is hosting because I'm in a car, and that's a bad idea to probably host while in a car. So I'm just going to give as much points as I can as the thing progresses before Jamison inevitably kicks me out for having horrible service.
Yeah, I have the power here. So if we ever feel like he's being horrible sound quality, sometimes it sounds a little bit different on y'all's end than ours. I'll just kick him out. But let's kind of talk about the spring game because obviously this is exciting. And, it may not be as exciting as the Lincoln Riley spring game eras. The recruiting aspect might not be as fun. The halftime, music shenanigans of some honky tonk but donkey donk might not be as fun. But they're trying to do a little bit to make it fun. And one thing that hit us hard, especially for me who can't attend this spring game because I'm going to one of my best friend's bachelor party, is they're doing a hot dog eating competition. And I figure, I don't know, is this going to be like a halftime or like in front of like the stadium? Because this was like the calling card for me that I've been like wanting to do forever. Like I was the one who suggested Bobby and Ty eat the glizzies as punishment for losing the college football pick'em last year and eating speed dogs. And now OU football legitimately is putting it on the big stage, and I can't be there. You don't understand how angry and sick I am that I have to miss that. Because is there any world where the OU application process, because there's an application for it. If you want to go fill it out, go look for it on like Soonersports.com. And it asks about like why you should be picked. I am an eating champion in the past of chicken nuggets, and I've in the past also ate very fast hot dogs, and I'm a student. Like, come on, they would have picked me, right?
I mean, the odds of you or Ty or probably less likely me getting selected would have been very high. Not just because of our, the podcast, but our experience with the with the sausage contest. We've been big on the glizzy goblin. We have certified glizzy gladiators over here, man. I'm pissed about it. I'm sad about it because it would be in front of everyone. And
it would have been so funny. And can you imagine like Ty? Remember Ty's videos of eating them fast? He's like, all right, I just microwaved this dog and I'm just going to enjoy a hot dog on video for a bit.
I definitely would have done the slow enjoyment of just a single hot dog in the middle of the competition. Yeah.
I was reading the comments.
I'm sure
ask for mustard, no water, all of that.
Yeah, I was reading the comments in because I knew there was going to be golden comments on the Twitter post for it, and it was like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna like sign up for that, and I can just get free lunch at the spring game. That's gonna be great." And I'm like, "Okay, please don't say this joke, please. Like this is gonna be so overdone in the Gooner chat of Twitter comments."
I would actually love for it to hilariously just flop and turn into just whoever they select is out there just eating, hot dogs normally and just slowly.
Oh, please don't. That would hurt so bad. Like the competitive angle in me, just thinking I've always wanted to do like an eating competition on a big stage, whether that be, like an arts festival or, like some kind of like, the medieval festival, if they ever did one. I would love to do like a turkey leg eating competition. I've always wanted to do that. And in front of like an OU crowd, and hot dogs is like my specialty because I've been practicing for multiple years now. Like, oh man. Okay, I really hope that it is a spectacle and it will be really fun. And we'll need our first correspondent on the scene, Ty, to tell us how it is.
For sure. I will immediately report back on who the reigning throat goat of the spring game is.
Oh, my God. We might need you to film it just so we know for prosperity so we can certify the results of whoever the throat goat is.
Yeah, if they are not dunking their buns in water, I'm going to actually be angry. There's going to be very angry messages for me. But moving on, other fun things that we got going on for the spring game. The biggest thing that everyone's talking about, obviously, is the Baker Mayfield Heisman statue. And I kind of want to bounce some things off y'all. Baker Mayfield at an extremely awkward point in his career. Very negative sentiment around him nationally. OU people will always hold a special part in their heart for him. But even, OU fans that are realistic realize like his professional skill set is very questionable. And I don't know if he's a starting quarterback in the NFL, and we don't know where he's going to end up past his tenure in Cleveland. There's very few quarterback opening spots for him to start. And here he comes, and we're celebrating him in this statue ceremony. I think it's going to be very very emotional, and it'll be very good for Baker to have this positive experience. But I still think there might be a little bit of awkwardness just because of his uncertainty in his career right now.
I mean, maybe. I would hope that everyone can recognize what Baker meant to OU in this career and just kind of forget about the Brown stuff for a while. And it might be good for him to kind of get that refresher, to remember who he was, to remember what he can be, and to, kind of be outside of that negative, pressure cooker that is Cleveland. So that might be able to help him out a little bit, a nice way to hit the refresh button. But for me, what I'm interested in is how awkward the Lincoln Riley thing will be with him. If there are any extra questions about that, we'll talk about that one next for sure. But Ty, you're number one NFL Sooner right now. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, I think honestly, outside of just his sort of mental state or whatever, I think that this sort of statue unveiling and the pomp and circumstance of just sort of a moment, not the whole weekend, but a moment to celebrate Baker Mayfield. I think it's exactly what he needs right now, not just for his mental state, but get it in the press, because it's going to be mentioned, on the talk shows. Here we are talking about it. We're not the professional media, you could tell, because we're not fake, but we're here talking about it, and it'll be mentioned on all the sports networks and everywhere else. And it's going to be good just to get some positive, talking points out there for his sake and for his brands, because like we talked about, he's on the market right now, and he's shopping around, and he's looking for his best place to go to. I think it's Tampa Bay, to sit around for a year and actually learn, which I made a big argument about right when he was first being drafted, is I really wish he would have some time to sit behind some other quarterback. And I think that really would have helped him. So, I don't think it's too late for that. So, but I think ultimately, like you guys said, good for him and his mental state, I bet. And I think it's good for his brand as well. So I think the timing, while it could seem awkward, I think it couldn't be better, actually.
Yeah, I agree. And, we know better than ever that Baker Mayfield is a very emotional person, obviously. But he takes things to heart. We've seen it, how he reacts to criticisms and trash talking, for example, in the Kansas game. He is very vocal about this. And he lets it get to him, and he uses it as, a chip on his shoulder. But after all of this on a national scale, no matter how strong you are, no matter how much negative you can turn into a positive, that chip's going to turn into a boulder on your shoulder, and it's going to start hurting his back. And I think this positive is going to really help him, because you could even see in that recent podcast, I forget who it was with, where he's sitting on his white couch with that golden retriever good boy on his back in the corner. If y'all know what I'm talking about.
It was Mike Stud. It was Mike Stud.
Yeah. Yes. It was Mike Stud. And the golden retriever or whatever was just sitting on his back or her back, and just looking for some scritches, or just having a great time. But you could tell, like, he was great, like feeling great to have a voice to kind of speak against all of these negative connotations about him, because it's just been constantly just hammering him. And especially in today's day and age with Twitter, it's just unrelenting and unending.
And I'll also say it was really good to hear him have fun, and he truly sounded happy, or happier, just kicking with the boys, kicking with Mike Stud down in Austin. So, Ty, I'm sorry I cut you off there. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
No, I was gonna say it's actually just came to mind while you guys were talking. I think it's interesting the Baker Mayfield saga currently because as we've just heard from a former not very well liked Oklahoma player about sort of the environment and the fan and maybe even media environment in Oklahoma being quote unquote toxic. But then you have, Baker Mayfield, who obviously was very successful at OU, but then experiencing what the national media is at the NFL level and how quickly those storylines can turn. And it's almost even reminiscent of say Russell Westbrook, who, enjoyed his golden time at Oklahoma, where it was a much safer, local media environment before that fiasco in LA that we're still seeing some of as well. So it's sort of interesting to put in perspective, if we have any potential recruits out there listening, the OU environment is not in fact toxic. It's perhaps a better environment and a bit of a safety wheels or training wheels on environment in terms of media relations for people.
Yeah, I have a nitpick about that Bleacher Report headline from saying toxic was Spencer Rattler, like the OU situation was toxic. Well, yeah, it was toxic. But whenever you read that headline that Bleacher Report put out, you start to think, oh, it was a Lincoln Riley thing and they didn't have the locker room and there's all these things. That could be the case. We don't know too much about that. But what it was is Spencer Rattler pretty much talking about how his fans gave up on him and booed him. Like that was why it was toxic. The Heisman favorite in the preseason coming in, not losing any games and was getting booed by his own fans. And albeit that was a small amount of fans, but any kind of boo is very noticeable whenever it's from your home field. And I feel like it was a very, classic journalism spinning it that it kind of pissed me off that yes, there's absolutely a strong chance that there were some locker room things. We heard some things like Lincoln Riley never even addressed the coaching rumors during the season, which made things really awkward. We've heard stuff like that. But the Spencer Rattler comment, of course it was toxic. Like, come on. He was booed. That's why it was toxic.
Yeah, and we talked about it mid-season of like how we kind of thought it was too far. We thought it was not the right move to boo him. And, frankly, I'll put it this way. The Lincoln Riley decision to put Caleb Williams out there was the right decision. Absolutely, 100%. But I feel like as a whole, the reason why is because he was more dynamic. He could bail out his what truly was an awful offensive mind in ways that Spencer Rattler could not. He just didn't. One didn't have the poise in the pocket to save, and two just couldn't escape. So, yeah, it was a toxic situation. It was unfortunate, and I can understand how he could give blame to Lincoln for, kind of validating a bunch of drunk OU students by putting him in there, but it won the game, so you can't complain too much.
Yeah, not to as we start to roll into the spring game itself, not to rehash, old things, but there have been plenty of OU players that have performed much worse, that have never been booed by the OU crowd, and I think it's well known by now that the most of the boos and the chanting all originated from the student section. And as a student at the time, I can 100% tell you that it had to do with the individual and his sort of behavior and actions and demeanor a lot more than it did the performance on the field. He was one of those guys that even had he been winning, wouldn't have been very popular. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we need to bring Kendall Roy in here to detoxify the environment.
Man, we keep bringing up Succession things. Bobby's sitting there with the
Sunnies
in the back.
It's been a couple months.
Hey, Bobby's got a driver right now. He's just riding right now all the way. But yeah, let's move on to spring game because this is what it's about. This is what we're talking about this podcast, and I thought would be pretty valuable. And also bring some good talking points is just go through the depth chart and kind of say projected 1 and 2 and just kind of get an idea of who these players are that we've gotten that are new and kind of where they're playing and kind of refresh our brains because we know we follow OU very closely, but sometimes it helps just to put things out and put all of the front, starting 11 on each side to the front of our brains. So let's just start off with the quarterback position. And we all know that QB1 is Dillon Gabriel. There's not even a conversation about it. Obviously, there would have been bigger changes if we would have accepted more transfers, but it seems like Dillon Gabriel is our guy, and he's commanding respect in practice, handles pressure extremely well, makes the throws. He might not be the versatile playmaker that we had seen in Caleb Williams, but he is a guy who understands the offense, is a clear leader, and can make it. But, I think the most interesting thing in the spring game, Dillon Gabriel will be fun to watch, but how much will he play? But to be honest with y'all, I get excited about the young guys when it comes down to the spring game, and I'm excited about seeing like Nick Evers, the freshman quarterback that we got from Flower Mound, to see, is this a guy is he just a stopgap backup quarterback for the next 4 years for us? Or is this a guy that we could actually think about having some potential to playing, a redshirt junior year whenever we need him if we miss on a quarterback in the future recruiting cycles?
Yeah, no, and the backup, especially at the quarterback position, the backup's always more interesting. Unless you have a transfer situation like the Jalen Hurts year or this year with Dillon Gabriel. But yeah, no, Evers, I'm excited to see what he has. I've heard plenty of things about how he has a lot of development left to go, that sort of stuff. But I don't know. I want to see what the kid has. Because normally, in a normal recruiting cycle, you hear about the kid over and over and over again, kind of like Rattler or Caleb Williams. But with Evers, we've just now gotten into knowing the guy since December. So that kind of adds an element to it. I'm excited to see what he has. Excited to watch some more of it. So I'm all in on Evers.
Yeah, I think it's important at a quarterback position, especially. I think it's always important where you have a firm number one guy. You don't want that sort of battle, but you can't have we're screwed if we have to put this guy in type quarterback at the level that OU is expected to and expecting to play at. You just cannot have a guy that is going to struggle. So I think it's great that we have a quarterback coming in with some experience and a quarterback coming in with some really great resume experience with our incoming offensive coordinator. I think that is really solid, and I think that will do us well, and I hope that will allow our guys to develop, specifically Evers, like we talked about, and then anyone else that comes in. Especially, it does concern me that Dillon Gabriel had some injury issues before. His bones are not strong enough to play even group of five football, as we've seen. So it concerns me that he could have some issues playing Power 5 football, as he's known to be a little weak-boned.
Yeah, for sure. And, obviously we're going to talk about Ralph Rucker too. We'll see a lot of him. We're going to probably see 4 deep at the skill position like quarterback. So we're really excited to see a guy like Ralph Rucker, a guy that got a lot of positive reviews as a true freshman, as a walk-on last year. So it'll be cool to see how he does. But overall, quarterback position, usually you don't see much with the blue jersey. They can't get touched. It's more so the other guys. And running back, I feel like, is a huge position that we need to look for moving forward. And Eric Gray, as a senior, should be the RB1 on this team, but we have a lot of weapons. And Marcus Major, Ty's favorite running back, this is his time to shine. He can be RB2. It can be being an RB2 in OU's offense is extremely valuable spot to have, especially losing Kennedy Brooks, a guy that played a non-traditional OU running back that would take a lot of carries. And then also probably the name that most fans are excited the most about this incoming recruiting class / new players is Javonte Barnes out of Las Vegas. But people are talking about what they've seen from him in practice in this brief time in the spring. This guy is a crazy athlete, 40+ inch vertical, extremely fast, and just seems like he's got that it factor when running the ball that just he can make plays. So this guy is getting rave reviews early, and obviously everyone gets rave reviews in the spring, but he seems to be the guy that I feel like these, message boards and Twitter is talking about the most. So I think running back by far is the most exciting room to watch in the spring game.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm excited to see where DeMarco takes this room, and this is year 2, year 3 maybe of Murray's room, and this is really like his guy. Obviously heavily involved in recruiting. He's a Vegas guy, just like DeMarco. So that's going to be really exciting. It's hard to gauge running backs in spring practice or in spring game just because of how contact is. But I don't know. I'm excited.
Yeah, like Bobby said, this is one of the ones I feel like out of all things, as we're going to very quickly get into, receivers is maybe the one thing where you can sort of glean some information. Running backs, much like quarterbacks, it's hard to tell. But Eric Gray has to be a firm RB1 for us this year. I think, honestly, regardless of performance, he will be no matter what. So I hope he performs as a true RB1 because I think he's going to be the RB1 no matter what, which is not a great situation. But if you follow advanced analytics, you do know that running backs maybe don't matter as much as people think that they would, especially as a skill position. I completely lost my train of thought there. Mims, this has got to be his breakout year, and I feel like he has had so many chances, and I feel like he's always been on the cusp and just always had stuff. He's obviously had some.
Are we talking about Major or Mims here?
Oh, Major. Yeah. Marcus
Okay,
Major.
gotcha. Okay. I was going to say your favorite guy, Marcus Major. I figured you're going to go on this one.
Yeah. No, Marcus Major, like I said, he's had all these opportunities to jump, and we've just never seen it on the field. And then we've seen some issues off the field as well. So it really, I know he has 2 more years, but if he doesn't impress this year, I can't imagine that he even remains on the team for next year. So
I would also like to note with Major, we've obviously made a couple jokes here and there about his off the field issues with academics, but it seems like it turned around. He got an academic achievement kind of shout out on Twitter, so he's doing well. He's back on the right track.
I really hope it's not that Texas football academic achievement award where they talk about their 2 whatever GPA or whatever it was. Was
highest
it 2.8?
2.89, highest Texas GPA in history.
Oh, well, you know what? At least those are some C's and some B's. So that's good. That'll get you degrees. So that's just A-okay. But yeah, I agree. Marcus Major has got a lot to prove this season and is in a stellar position to be. Let's kind of talk about wide receivers too. Ty wanted to hop in and talk about Marvin Mims, but there's a lot of wide receivers. Just naming, say, the top 10-ish, think about Marvin Mims as a wide receiver 1, even though we talked about all last season. Does this team truly have a guy that can take over and be a wide receiver 1 that can get 10 catches and dominate and be target heavy? I don't know if we have that. Theo Weiss could be that guy. Coming off injury, we saw it with his recurrent foot injury that he hurt twice. We'll see how he returns in form, or if he will have, some setbacks like he had last season. Hopefully not. And maybe he might not be the same guy he was whenever he came into college. Just going down the list, I think Drake Stoops is probably number 3. Then a Jalil Farooq, a guy that a lot of people are talking big about, around number 4. Then you talk about Trayvon West and Brian Darby, that 5'6" range that got a lot of run in that kind of area last year. Trayvon West had some big plays. Brian Darby had some good catches. And then some of the young guys, redshirt freshman Cody Jackson, see if he can make a name. And then the big, tall wide receivers that we got in this recruiting class, and Nick Anderson being Rodney Anderson's brother. And then Jaden Gibson, 6'5" out of Florida, that a lot of people are talking about, that this guy just looks like another, beast on the field. Like, he looks obviously different than the people around him. That's how long and lanky and athletic he looks. He just has to kind of polish some of these football things. But he's going to have some plays, probably just a small amount this season, and hope maybe in the spring game, or you're going to say, wow, I see something there. He's not there yet, but he definitely has something.
The guy I'm personally circling for me, and I'm a sucker for these momentum type of guys, but it's Jaleel Farooq. Um, I feel like you kind of know what you got with Mims. You know what you got with like a bit of a healthy Theo Weiss. But Jaleel Farooq, we saw a lot of really good stuff in that Alamo Bowl. And he's the type of guy who I could see, being a pretty solid playmaker for us. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of the highlights and some of the what he could put on just in terms of his progression. Because we didn't see a ton of him last fall under Lincoln Riley.
For sure. I think I'm going to go ahead and who knows with the spring game. I really don't think that the spring game is a super great gauge for the season. So I'm going to dip into a little bit of way too early cold takes for the season. Theo Weiss and his entire receiver class that he came in with Hazelwood and then Bridges, that has been the most cursed sort of position group that has ever graced OU's campus and fields. They came in with so much hype. Like people were talking about having 4 OU players at the Heisman ceremony, our quarterback, and then those 3 receivers. And there has just never been anything close to the hype that has come in. So I'm not a big fan. I'm going to say right now that I expect he is not even a first string quarterback for us, but receiver as we go into the season. I really think this is Mims' year to be our wide receiver 1. If we run an offense that really focuses on that, who knows? And Drake Stoops, again, always up there. And at this point, I think he has so much staying power and he's building such a resume. He could be a firm 1 or 2 for sure at OU. And at the trajectory he's on right now, I wouldn't be surprised if he actually went to the NFL, whether he would play or what there, who knows? But he has just been propelled by his own work ethic and then just the underperformance of expected superstars around him. I'll give a second shout out again to Nick Anderson, but I really feel like our top 4 receivers this year are going to be Mims, Stoops, and then a freshman or 2.
Yeah, I think Farooq could definitely step on and take that role from Theo Weiss. But if Theo Weiss is playing any of how he was looking early that freshman year, we all remember, that juke that he had in the Baylor game, and he was starting to really come on. That's his position to have, and with 3 wide receiver set for sure. I would like to buy a lot of Jaleel Farooq stock, but he's got to rise up the ladder because Theo Weiss is going to be hard to beat.
Yeah, he's just kind of too trendy of a stock right now.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely would be one of those you buy low on. You probably waited too long if you're buying now at this point.
Yeah.
So I think that's fair.
Yeah. Okay. Let's kind of briefly talk about the tight end room because the tight end room is kind of a little bit awkward. Losing Jeremiah Hall from the halfback position, if you want to group that in there, would be a big hit. But his podcasting counterpart in Braden Willis, this is his senior year. We're hoping for him to take a big jump because I feel like as of recently, we've been saying we wanted to see a big jump from him. We saw the athleticism of him coming in as a wide receiver from high school and play a little bit in that H-back position. But last year, I was kind of disappointed with his play. I feel like he could have done a lot better. But maybe that's just because Caleb Williams was not a tight end throwing quarterback. And we need to kind of see, is Dillon Gabriel a tight end kind of guy? We've seen the highlights that OU Twitter has posted, a great throw that he threw to him in the end zone. So maybe he's a guy that likes to target his tight end more and rather than look to the outside. Other names at the tight end position, Daniel Parker, the transfer from Missouri. He's a strong blocking tight end, but definitely has the hands to catch. Just to keep an eye out as that is a new face. And then Jason Llewellyn from Alito will probably another number 3. He's going to take a little while to get in, to serious rotation, but is a guy that the coaching staff feels very confident in as a guy who can be a big body, can block and receive, do everything kind of tight end. Exactly what you want in football, because I feel like a lot of tight ends nowadays are either you're a receiving tight end, like an Evan Ingram of the Giants who can only receive, just doesn't block, or you're just a pure blocker that just really can't do much. But if you can do both, you're extremely valuable, especially, and that's why NFL plays big bucks to guys that can do that.
Yeah, and Joe John's all about that blocking, that hybrid type of tight end for sure. So I think Llewellyn, I'm excited about him. I think he's probably about a year away from making an impact for sure, just because of Braden Willis, etc. But yeah, no, I'm excited to see how Levy operates this. Especially, I could see him favoring tight ends. Maybe this could just be a dumb assumption, but just because he was an offensive lineman himself, might be a type of guy who shows love to the big guys. But we'll see how it goes. I will say with Willis, obviously you can't tell how good a team is going to be based on the highlights from spring practice. But that 2-foot touch that they dropped today looked pretty damn good, I will say.
Yeah, I think it's kind of been the Braden Willis show, and that's sort of the expectation because he's staying. But I think it is very clearly, and I think we'll see it when the first team for now trots out onto the field for the game. I think Daniel Parker is the clear main guy. He's a senior. He would not have transferred to OU to sit on the bench. He made his decision to transfer after Venables came in. So I think it speaks to his confidence that he will be the main guy and the main show here under Levy. He's coming from Missouri, like we talked about, primary a blocking type guy, but can catch. But that's how they're mostly used successfully in the NFL. And that's how they're mostly used successfully in the SEC as well, where he's coming from and where our OC Levy is coming from. So I think Daniel Parker is, expected to be pretty decent by everyone, but I think a lot of people have a sort of familiarity bias. Wow, that was hard to say, for Braden Willis, and sort of he's our guy. We want him to do well, but Daniel Parker is our guy now as well. And I think that he, in my opinion, is going to be the main dude. And I think we're going to start to see some differences in the offense because I feel like a lot of OU fans are still looking at these personnel and even these new coaching personnel within a sort of Lincoln Riley or even Bob Stoops-esque scheme. And I think we're going to see something very different from even Bob Stoops. I know Venables is coming from sort of the Stoops era or the Stoops tree at OU, but I think we're going to see something much more akin to maybe early 2000s OU or what we see as the more dominant teams nationally now, or maybe even a more pro style. And I think Daniel Parker fits that offense much better. I think, it comes down to, do you look at a tight end as a receiver who also is big enough to be on the line of blocks, or a lineman who every now and then can go down and catch something here and there? And I think depending on how you look at the tight end position, or what you think the best use of the tight end position is going to be, which one of those two guys you are expecting or hoping is going to be our main guy. So it'll be interesting to see for sure. I think this is one of the more interesting what ifs right now.
Yeah, Jeff Levy loves establishing the run. We've seen that plenty at Ole Miss. And Daniel Parker is going to be his best friend. There's obviously a reason why Daniel Parker jumped into the OU boat from the transfer portal extremely quickly. This guy had seen Jeff Levy, in the SEC, and they'd seen each other. And obviously it was just a match. I would not be surprised at all if Daniel Parker gets a good amount of snaps, and maybe the tight end who gets the most snaps might not be your tight end one, because Braden Willis probably will be, because he's going to get the most, hype on camera. But Daniel Parker is going to be out on the field a lot. Moving on to the big guys, kind of projected first string offensive linemen that they're running right now in spring. Left tackle would be Anton Harrison. We've seen a lot of him in the past years, now being a junior with 2 years under his belt as kind of an off and on starter the past 2 years. At the left guard, McCabe Mattower from UCLA. It looks to be from Cal, right? From Cal. UCLA is our right guard, Chris Murray. And then center is a huge toss-up. Andrew Rame has been out with an ankle injury and is just now returning to practice. And Robert Conjul has had a concussion, and I think he's just back now. So that seems to be a toss-up between the two. I would guess that Conjul is going to have the starting role there because of Andrew Rame with that injury, plus that he had an injury to end the year last year. So it seems like he hasn't been able to stay healthy as of recently. And then at the right tackle, Wanye Morris, a guy that we thought was going to be that right tackle last year, at a position that with Tyrese Robinson moving out from right guard to right tackle, I was not happy with. There was a lot of deficiencies on our right side because of Tyrese's shorter arms. And Wanye wasn't able to really grasp the beat and bow offense, but it seems like he's getting it now. A lot of offensive linemen have troubles getting a hold of beat and bow's scheme, but it seems like Wanye, with him being the number one right tackle in this offense, is starting to get it. So not really much to see in terms of watching the spring game of offensive linemen, but let me just kind of talk about the backups too. I know I'm kind of talking a lot here just to kind of get an idea of who would be the other guys at those positions. Back up at left tackle, I think would be Savion Byrd, the freshman out of Denton. And then right tackle, I think, is Aaron Parks out of the East Coast. He'd be a sophomore now. At the guard positions, Bray Walker, who now be a senior, put his name into the transfer portal and is now out. He should be playing at the guard position. And then kind of, at the other guard, it's going to be a mixed bag of who you might see like a Marcus Alexander. You might see a Marcus Hicks, a guy converted defensive lineman. And then at the center position, we'll kind of talk about Andrew Raymond Conchal, but allegedly there's a walk-on Kyle Ergen-Wright that has been playing really well as those two are out. So he might be kind of an Ian MacGyver of the past that got a lot of play time, even though we hadn't heard of him much until he was a later in his year senior walk-on.
Yeah, there's a long way before we have any idea about this O-line. Not much more to talk about, but it's going to be interesting to see how it folds out.
I do want to say with the O-line briefly, Jamison, like you touched on, Beatonbow's offensive line scheme and overall game plan, and it's just the way he plays. I'm for some reason struggling for words today. Like you said, it's been notoriously difficult for guys to catch on to. I wonder if we're going to see a positive change in how quickly guys are catching on just by the locker room culture. And I'm saying this because I hope that what we've seen from Venables so far and from his staff and changing that locker room culture, and then what we've been hearing from the locker room culture under Riley, even when things were going well out on the field, hopefully maybe there's a little more incentive or a little more buy-in to do that extra step off the field, that extra little bit of studying and whatnot. So hopefully, we might see an impact there. Who knows? I mostly just being a homer because, like we said, up until that first real snap or that first real time that things go wrong, nothing that your new coach does is wrong. So complete buy-in here. Hopefully that complete buy-in from the players is positively reflected in their knowledge of the game as well.
Well, guys, I hate to say it, but I'm going to have to jump off of here soon for two reasons. One, approaching Waco and everything just kind of went to hell because, it's Waco. And two, the passengers in the car with me have been listening to the Schooner Pod for about 40 minutes, which is a dangerous amount of time to listen to the Schooner Pod, far exceeding the dosage. I just want to say a quick thing about the defense. Before I know y'all are about to talk to it, I'll be hanging out backstage. Yeah, it's looking more decimated than I thought it was. I think that's more of just a natural progression. So it's gonna look pretty green. I think whoever has the better, more first team offense type of guys, I think they do better here. That's just the better side. Even though the defense will probably be a little bit better coached. I'm interested to see it though. It'll be very fun and very jealous of everybody there. Would have loved to see the Baker statue. Let's be honest. We would have won the dog contest by far.
Yes,
there's
no doubt.
I trained in the crucible of losing that losing the weekend spread for that. But anyways, I'm out of here. Have a good rest of your show, guys, and for everyone listening, thanks for listening. Hope the internet wasn't too bad. So, peace.
Yeah, so losing Bobby here, but 40 minutes is not that much for y'all, so keep listening because we've got to talk about the defense. We'll talk about kind of similar how we went through the offense. So let's move forward to the defensive line tie. Defensive tackle and nose tackle will be an interesting position for us. Losing Perrion Winfrey who's going to sit in that nose tackle position. We saw Isaiah Coe, a guy that could possibly step in that might probably be the number one. Or would it Jeffrey Johnson from Tulane? Will he play nose tackle, or is he going to be more of a defensive tackle? Jordan Kelly is a guy who's a senior now that it seems like we always hear about some positive things about him as a defensive lineman, but he's never really made a big name for himself. Nose guard, really is the position that I'm concerned about the most in terms of our defense as a whole, because there's a lot of question marks. Are you interested at all in any of those people I named? I mean, Jeffrey Johnson for Tulane worked us, and he might be fun, but I still don't even know if he's a true nose guard.
Yeah, I think that Jeffrey Johnson, like you said, I think he is probably our go-to guy for the nose tackle. And when I look at it, I look at the fact that, one, Venables is a defensive guy through and through. And he came in and saw our retained personnel on the defensive side and saw our deficiencies, like you said, one of our big deficiencies defensively being nose tackle. And then he went out there and he specifically went after Jeffrey Johnson. So like we said, there's not sort of clarity, and the spring game won't even give us that clarity because it's still very early in terms of this unit coming together as a team. So I don't know that the spring game is going to be indicative 100% of, well, I know it won't be 100% indicative of what we see, but I think that Venables has, through his actions, made it clear that he's looking at Jeffrey Johnson being our nose tackle here, being that was one of the guys that he specifically went out, and did some recruiting for it and tried to bring in. And then, like we said, OU fans are a little bit familiar with him, giving us a hard time last season. So it's, we did beat them, but if you can beat them, but they're still good, then join them, I guess.
Yeah, I am excited about the position. I believe in Isaac Coe. I feel like he showed some things last year, some little glimpses. And with him being, at the third spot probably on the roster at that position last year, really didn't give him too much shine. So maybe he can show some things. As a defensive tackle, that's probably our most solidified position in, maybe not the whole defense, but definitely the defensive line. Jalen Redmond coming back, hopefully coming through this whole season and spring and offseason healthy, and showing that he can be, an NFL draft guy rather than just a guy that shows some great things and then just gets hurt for a little bit. You can't do that in the NFL. So this is a huge season for him. I think he could be the star of this defense, even though there's more established guys who started longer than him. I think he can absolutely be a star. He's that talented. Behind him, you think of guys like Corey Robertson. You think of guys like Kelvin Gilliam. You think of, I guess that's kind of the top three that come to my mind. Do you think Jalen Redmond, this is kind of just, guessing here, but if Jalen Redmond were to stay healthy this whole season, do you think he could be like one of our best, if not our best defender on this team?
That's a big bill. And I almost think that is one of the things that you can't even decide by your performance. I think that who your best defender on your team is almost something that the opposing teams get to decide, which we saw. One thing that really comes to mind is Kenneth Murray in that Army game with just an absurd number of tackles, just because Army continued to, go where he was at, or even, turn the clock back to a classic Schooner Pod favorite like Zach Sanchez as a cornerback, and just constantly having targets his way and maybe getting lucky, maybe skill, but he had targets coming his way a lot more than everyone else. So obviously on the D line, you have the potential to be involved in every play. But I think that if he does continue to be healthy, I think he is in a system that is much more capable of making him look like a number one on the entire defense player, which of course is great for his future and his stock and his personal brand. So I think, it's a team sport, and the opposing side has a vote, but I think that there is super strong potential for him to be our number one, defensive guy. So.
Yeah, I agree. I really believe a lot of him. I feel like the times that Perry Owen Winfrey looked like a beast is because Jalen Redmond was doing a lot of the dirty work. I really believe in him, and hopefully he stays healthy. Obviously, his medical issues that he had, some of them were not really sports injuries. So hopefully he's good moving forward. Moving into the defensive end position group, the most beloved problem, not the most beloved, but one of the most beloved Sooners on this team, probably going to be the star now of how much people are talking about him, is Etha Downs, the sophomore. He'll probably be one of the defensive ends, opposite of Reggie Grimes, a guy that was a big get for us in recruiting 3 years ago. And, was a very high-end recruit and is a guy that could have gone to Alabama. But other guys at defensive end, we got the Hawaii transfer in Jonah Laulu. Also, we have Marcus Stripling as a senior, a guy that showed a lot of flashes and big-time leadership. And then also, Clayton Smith, a guy that was a huge get out of Texas in the recruiting cycle 2 cycles ago. And then Nathan Rollins-Kilbong, that was out of the Northwest area in Oregon. That is just an absolute freak of a man, and 6'7". He's an athlete and can get over that corner and rush the quarterback. Another guy to watch to see if he's making any kind of, like headway, or is he going to turn into, the next Joseph Wette that doesn't really do much. But I think Ethan Downs probably might have the most eyes on him because so many people love the guy that, tries hard every single practice, even if it's a very light end drill, and brings intensity to every single play. Those guys are valuable, and it takes a special person to do that.
Yeah, for sure. And there is definitely something to be said, and I've said this constantly on the Schooner Pod, for having a guy that brings up those around him, maybe even if he's not the best candidate when it comes to just pure stats. Obviously, still looking for a chance to prove himself and still looking for a system that is conducive towards someone being able to prove themselves defensively. I think one of the main things that jumps out to me with this position group is it's pretty much an even split down the board in terms of names we're looking at. We got 4 underclassmen and 4 upperclassmen, which is always good to see. You hate to see situations where things are really top heavy, and a lot of the guys that we're talking about, as potential guys that could have a breakout year. And I think, as we're going to continue to talk about, this is anyone's year on the defense to have a breakout year. There's never been a better time for an OU defensive player to have a breakout year, at least in the past, we'll say 15 years. There hasn't been a better time for an OU defender to have a breakout year. So I really like our Hawaii transfer, like you mentioned. Big Samoan dude, has really good stats at what we're continuing to find out if you follow sort of the drama of college football. Was maybe not an ideal situation at all. Not for him specifically, but just for everyone at that Hawaii program and system for the past couple of years. So I'm excited to see what he's going to bring to the table. Cool to see a guy, we have plenty of people from, a lot of the big places, but cool to see a guy from Vegas who lived in Hawaii for a little bit too, come out here to give us a shot as well. So I think it really could be anyone's game. We mentioned, I think this was the first position group, offense or defense, that we rolled to where we've had to mention pretty much every single name. We've I think we mentioned all 3 quarterbacks or potential quarterbacks, obviously, but this is the first one where I think top to bottom, anyone really has the potential to have a standout year, even if they're not a main dude. Maybe they just come in and they're not expected to be a preferred backup, and they get some shots in and they're shown to be a real stand-up or guy that we're going to be able to rely on. So I'm so excited about our D-line as a whole.
Yeah, agreed. Defensive ends, it's always nice to have a deep group anyways, because whenever they're getting after the quarterback, if you can get those guys moving on first couple downs and then send in a fresh new pair, like having Ethan Downs motor on one side, then Reggie Grimes skill set, and then if they get gassed, you can take them out and put in like a Laulu and Marcus Stripling, like 2 very seasoned veteran upperclassmen that you're talking about. That's a tough time to block if you're an offensive lineman who's on the field the whole time that doesn't get subbed out, and you're bringing in fresh guys on the defensive line like that. That's going to be tough. But you were talking about breakout players, and I think this is one of the guys that everyone's been talking about as a breakout player at this next position group, the weak side linebacker, and that being Danny Stutzman. Absolute tackling machine. Had an elbow injury last year that kind of, took him out for a couple games, but is able to come back. You just saw that this guy just has that psycho attitude, just will go downhill and just do whatever. he's just a football junkie, and he's a lot of fun too. He's very fun on Twitter. This guy could be a tackling machine for us, and it seems like he solidified himself as the best linebacker in a group that we thought that we had some guys that were going to be our linebackers of the future, like a Deshaun White who's still here, but it seems like he had some weaknesses that has been taken over by youth. David Ugwebu, great tackler, but can he tackle in the open field and cover? Probably not, but he probably is going to be our number one middle linebacker. Other names to keep a look at, we have the 2 freshman linebackers and Kip Lewis and Kobe McKenzie. And I guess the third one that I don't want to forget, I guess he plays more of that S linebacker that they're calling now, is Jaron Kanik, also from Kansas. We got a lot of fun young linebackers. And kind of, I guess we can move on to this S linebacker position. Shane Witter, a guy that has shown some flashes on special team and some in the season last year, but this is one of our fastest guys on our team, and he's a linebacker. Like, he's got the tools to be something special. And at that S linebacker, which is, a little bit not as central as the weak side in the middle linebacker, maybe he'll be able to show his speed and his athleticism and kind of have some more flashes this year as he is a junior.
Yeah, the big guy, that everyone I think has been looking forward to on the defense, like we just mentioned, is hands down, in my opinion, Danny Stutzman. Just huge personality. He is super, super loved within the locker room, and he has been a guy that has been loved in the locker room on both sides of the ball since before he was playing. The players really for OU and their interactions with him and they talking about him as really what brought his name forward before anyone in the media ever reported on anything he was doing on the field. And then he brings in that on the field, we've yet to see it sort of real world yet, but that on the field pedigree and ability as well now is starting to come together. And it just being a very smart linebacker at this point in this era of college football is very much a skill position, and it's becoming a very, very difficult, very skill intensive position, not just physically but also mentally, much like the defensive backs out there are having to do, and he's just having a little bit more time to develop physically and mentally and game plan wise. I think he is really going to be a big breakout guy. I wouldn't be surprised if he was considered one of the big, main OU players on both sides of the ball. And it's been a long time since OU has had a defender who we can really say has been like, one of the main guys. And I sort of almost want to cut myself off here because I don't want to jinx him, but I think by far, there's tons of names here, but I think it cannot be said enough. Keep your eyes on Danny Stutzman and sort of, to use the stock market analogy again, it's if you wanted to be early on buying into the Danny Stutzman hype, you're about a year late because there was a lot of really early investors, but I would get in on that now before the season because I expect that we're going to see great things out of him. And he's one of those guys, that brings up the performance of those around him as well. So super excited to see him come out here and play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like he's kind of taken over as the best linebacker in this group in terms of spring ball, what the message boards are saying. So, this is a guy that everyone loves, and he's got, the potential to be a big time tackler. You can stuff the stat sheet, and then everyone loves him off the field. Honestly, that's the recipe. That's what you want. But the linebacker absolutely might be the most scary group for me. I feel like there's still some weaknesses, depending on Danny Stutzman, a guy that was, hurt during his freshman year. Now is coming in as a sophomore. Even though we believe highly in him, there's not as much depth that we have as the defensive line. So I'm a little bit nervous about the linebackers, but to be honest with you, if you're going to have weaknesses on those 3 levels, the linebackers are the probably one that you would choose because there's a lot less linebackers on the field than there are defensive backs. Let's kind of hop in. We'll hit nickelback, cornerbacks, and then we'll end with the safeties. At the nickelback position, looking like Justin Broyle stepping into his, I think his 5th year, senior year, would probably take that position. But I think he's probably going to have a solid hold on that. Other guys that we'd be playing nickelback, look at, Trey Morrison, one of our transfers. And then maybe a Kanye Walker transfer from Louisville, but it looks like Kanye Walker has actually been getting run with the ones in spring game. 6'2", mega athlete, can turn his hips really, really well, and the coaches seem to adore him as a cornerback. Seems like he is something, maybe a hidden gem at that transfer from Louisville, and seems like he's been taking the number one spot from DJ Graham, who's been hurt recently. DJ Graham looks like he's returned to practice in the past couple of days. Should be good to go for the spring game. But Kanye Walker took his spot and then showed out in it. And early in the spring, whenever you're hurt for a little bit, it sucks because there's going to give more opportunity to the younger guys to go out and make a name for themselves. And it's going to be harder to fight those guys off because of how much legitimacy they showed playing against the number one offense as a number one defender. Other number one cornerback would be Woody Washington, should be one of the leaders of this team. And then would Jaden Davis be another number one cornerback as well? So we're going to have some depth at the cornerback position. There should be some good battles. Other guys to keep an eye on would be CJ Colden. I'm pretty sure he's the Wyoming transfer. And then also Gentry Williams, who we got straight out of Tulsa, one of the best recruits in our recruiting class, is playing DB. So he might be a fun guy to keep an eye on the spring game. And I guess just other guys, Josh Eaton would be another guy that we feel like we've been talking about for 3 years now as a fun guy to watch as a 6'2" cornerback, but it's still looking to put the pieces together. Ty, what is your kind of thought process on do you like Woody Washington, DJ Graham, and Jaden Davis as cornerbacks, or would you kind of be happy to see, a replacement from one of these young guys to overthrow them?
Yeah, I think, ultimately it's about winning games. So my
there you
favorite
go.
Guy
Good analysis.
My favorite guy is the one that's winning for us, So I had two quick spring game specific notes before I dive into a little bit more. Do you know, is Colden going to be playing in the spring game? I know he was sort of a late transfer in, and I don't think he practiced with the team this spring. So I don't know that we would see any of him.
Yeah, that might be right, because I'm just kind of looking at the depth chart. Yeah. I actually haven't heard a lick about CJ Colden at all in terms of notes. So I guess not.
Yeah, I think he's not coming until the summer. He might be on campus, but I don't think he is practicing with the team in the spring for whatever reason. And then another guy, I didn't hear you mention. You might have him written down somewhere. You're about to bring it up, or maybe you did, and I just fell through the cracks. But Trey Morrison from North Carolina.
Oh yeah, I talked about him in nickelback behind Justin Broyles.
Okay, yeah, but that's one of the big guys that jumped out to me just when I was doing my sort of preparation for the podcast. I went through and was looking at all the guys that sort of Venables specifically had sought out, and obviously being from Clemson or coming from Clemson, he had played UNC several times. Trey Morrison now a senior, so he's played Venables, as much as he's played in the ACC over there at UNC, who's been very successful under Mac Brown. Shout out to fellow Jordan School UNC. But any guy that Venables has sort of seen play and sought out specifically, I definitely am excited to see. So Trey Morrison, very excited to see him. But then, like you gave me the prompt, guys like Woody Washington, DJ Graham, sort of the old names that we've been looking for at OU, and everyone's been expecting, this is going to be their breakout time. Obviously, I hope someone has a breakout time. I don't really have an emotional attachment to any one of them. I'm sure some fans do to specific guys, but I think we have a ton of potential, a ton of transfers coming in, like you mentioned. So I would love for it to be one of the old names that OU fans have heard, but ultimately they're all OU players now, and they're all our guys. So whatever one can perform, I do think, like I talked about with the D linemen. And it goes for the linebackers too, even though I didn't mention it then. This is a system that I think is much more conducive to someone on the defense being able to have a standout time, because it really helps when the entire defense is solid and it's not just your one star player, Kenneth Murray against Army. Again, you're one dude that can perform sort of holding it together. That looks good on you, but also it's not great because that's not how the sport is supposed to be played. And your back's against the wall when you're playing like that. As a player, it is much better for a defensive guy when the whole system is working. So who knows? We're still very early, like we talked about, with Colton, one of the biggest names. I know for sure he hasn't been practicing in the early spring with the team, and I'm sure our listeners listening to this right now know more than us and are screaming at their phones and wondering why they listen to us if we don't know. But a lot still to come together on this team. And again, the spring game, who knows if it's going to be really indicative of anything performance-wise. I think the real tea leaves to read into are sort of who looks like they're the preferred guys by the coaches. Even if you're sitting in the stands or watching on TV with your binoculars, or you probably don't need binoculars for watching on TV, but just looking at the guys who, when they come off the field, who are the coaches talking to, because the coaches generally, unless they're yelling at someone, they're talking to or they're interacting with the main guys. So that's how you can really get some reads. So I would sort of try to read in between the lines and do some sleuthing for the spring game. I think you're going to learn more by seeing who are the coaches interacting with most on the sidelines, who's coming out with what sets. But we don't know if this is going to be, some people do like a solid first team, second team spring game. Some people do, a weird, there's all sorts of, there's no rules for a spring game, and we really don't know how this one is going to be. So who knows what we're going to see.
I think the first team and the third team are going to be on one team, and the second and the fourth, if I remember reading that right. So that kind of really puts the second and fourth team at a disadvantage, which I feel like 2 and 3 would be better together, and 1 and 4. But it kind of makes sense because you don't want to give your first team too much run. So you kind of want to have that next step in the third team behind them rather than your fourth team getting a lot of run. But you still want the first team to go against the second team at the beginning of the game. So that's kind of the thought process there. So I think that's how it's going to go. But yeah, I agree. I'm not really, attached to any of our cornerbacks. I like Woody Washington, but DJ Graham, even though he's made some fun plays and obviously made the catch versus Texas, he got burned a lot at the end of the season last year. Like that Oregon game was ugly. Like it was ugly. And I don't know. I'd be very happy to see a guy like Kanye Walker come in and ruffle some feathers and be a 6'2" cornerback, a guy that we really haven't seen. We talked about all these long guys in the Alex Grinch system, and here we go. He's gone. Even though his cornerbacks have been 6 foot and Woody Washington and 5'10" and Jaden Davis, DJ Graham being 6 foot, I think as well, 6'1" maybe. And now we come in a long, lanky quarterback. Kanye Walker, he can move his hips. I'm down. Let's try it. So hopefully he gets some good run and we see some good things from him. And then kind of moving on to our last position group being the safeties. We can actually talk about safety depth this year and actually believe in ourselves that we might see something different because Patrick Fields and De'Aaron Turner-Yell are no longer here. And there's actually a chance that we will see, 4 deep safeties. And the clear number 1 and number 2 are at free safety. We have Key Lawrence. It seems like he has been extremely vocal in spring practice, has been making big time plays, and seems to be a leader, a guy that everyone looks up to in his second year coming from Tennessee as a junior. And then Billy Bowman making the move from all over the offense. And it seems like he's found his home at strong safety and seems like he's doing really well there. And it seems like he's got that job. Other guys to look for at that safety position. Bryson Washington is a name we've been talking about for a while now. I think he's been hurt as of recently, so we'll see if he plays in the spring game. Jordan Mukes, we saw a little bit of him to end the year. Oklahoma guy, basketball player, a little bit new to football, but long, lanky, and athletic. So hopefully he's catching on to the game a little bit more. Damon Harmon, and then Robert Spears-Jennings. Robert Spears-Jennings being the freshman at Broken Arrow, who ran up the recruiting rankings at the end of the recruiting year last year because of his speed and his knowledge of the game. So maybe we might see some things out of him, but it seems like it feels pretty good to have Key Lawrence stepping into that free safety spot because we saw a lot of good things from him last season. And then Billy Bowman finding a home, and hopefully they don't move him around like they did last year.
Yeah, really just not playing on our back foot, is going to be a big advantage, like you talked about, just having some depth, hopefully not having to move guys around all over. I think we're all counting on the system being much improved or much more consistent. And I really think consistency is the key. Not to beat the dead horse with plain sayings, but I think a lot of people would agree in that we'd almost rather have safeties who you sort of struggle to remember their names because they're just consistent, doing their job in coverage. Ideally, if you're a defensive back and you're playing the coverage game specifically, you're never even having to break it up or anything else because you're causing the quarterback to not even look that way into your zone or into your coverage or whatever else. So it's like OU fans know with Buki specifically, if you're really talking about one of your safeties all the time, it's probably not a good thing because one, either your entire defensive system is failing and your safety is constantly involved in having to make a play where they're a star player, but by the point where your safety is having to make a play, it's probably already a first down anyways, or your safety is just doing the craziest stuff in plays where he's having to potentially make the play because your entire system has failed, which was sort of the Buki situation, was the last link in the chain also failing, or the last line of defense was also failing after every other line had already failed. I think that's a good analogy for the Buki situation. But
you make a really good point because let's not forget the name safety. Like, say it out loud. We keep on saying it because we've been saying it for years and we're football junkies. The word safety means in case of emergency or like you don't need it like urgently. You just kind of have it. Like a safety doesn't need to be a pivotal part of your defense. It needs to be there to clean up and make sure your edges are clean. So safeties, are great. We've seen great ones, become big time NFL players. But you look at, the NFL draft and mock drafts, like safeties aren't guys that they don't go too high because they're not difference makers. We talk about Jamal Adams as a guy who went really high in the NFL draft, but you can do without a really big safety. Kyle Hamilton's the big name coming out of Notre Dame this year, but even though he might have been one of the most top 2-3 talented guys in the college football last year, he's probably going to be near the, the 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 range. Like safeties should not be that pivotal spot, but having talent back there, just in case there is something that goes bad, because with a new defensive scheme coming, it's going to happen. There's no if about it. It's going to happen because there's going to be a learning curve here. Having skillful guys like a leader in Key Lawrence and then an extreme athlete as Billy Bowman makes me feel a lot better.
Yeah, ultimately, having the best safety, you want to have the best safeties, but having the best safeties is like having the best homeowners insurance, which you also want to have, but you never want to be talking about it all the time. You never want to be like, yeah, my homeowners insurance is great. Past 4 times my house is burned down. They've paid for a new one. Maybe you should just make sure that your house stops burning down. But it's going to happen hopefully your house doesn't burn down.
I was worried about this analogy, but it's actually pretty good.
Yeah. Safeties they're going to get engaged eventually, but you want to have the best ones, but you never want to be, whether they're good or bad, it's indicative of a greater problem, when they're in action. It's like having the best fire extinguisher, the best, airbags in your car, whatever else. You gotta, don't fight the symptoms, fight the root cause is sort of thing with the safeties.
Good old preventative medicine. But moving on to our special team groups, you would think Billy Bowman is going to get some more run in the return game at kickoff return. I'm curious to see who's going to be next to him. We had seen Eric Gray in the past, but with him being the RB1, I would not expect him to be back there. I really just kind of shooting. I wouldn't be surprised if it's like a Javonte Barnes plays back there as well. Punt return. It's going to be a new mindset. What we have done in the past was Marvin Mims or the best wide receiver, the best hands like a Drake Stoops would be back there. But are we going to put someone back there that's more electric and not as a for sure hands catcher that can just make the catch and make a couple jukes and get you 8 yards? And then our kicker. New kicker, no Gabe Burkich. So Schmidt, the fake Gabe Burkich that came through last year whenever Burkich slept through his alarm. He's here. Looked like he was pretty good whenever he kicked. Michael Turk coming back for his super senior season. Obviously, everyone loves Michael Turk. And then Casey Kelleher, the long snapper. I guess Can you think of anyone else in that kickoff return game that you would like back there other than kind of Javonte Barnes and Billy Bowman? Because I think that's my favorite two that I put back there.
I almost feel like, knock on wood, because but I think it's a fair assessment to say that we're probably going to see some situations where we have some leeway to experiment this season. Specifically some situations where we're up a couple points and we can start to play around. And like we talked about much earlier in the podcast, there's a lot of freshman depth. There's a lot of young depth, young talent in our receiver room right now. And I think there's going to be a lot of potential for a lot of younger guys to sort of get plugged in and get some real game experience in that kick return spot. And I think we're going to see a lot of names, and I think it's a logical thing to do. I would expect that we see maybe a little bit less Drake Stoops back there kick returning, which ties into an earlier take of mine about I expect him to be a firm, probably number 2 receiver, and I expect us to start giving him, his rest there on the kick. He was a constant kick and punt returner for us last year and the year before, but I expect with him sort of moving up and having some younger guys that we maybe see some new names down there, because I feel like that's a good spot to sort of play around and test guys, because ultimately, it's sometimes a different animal to catch a punt or return a kick, but it is in most cases, barring onsides or weird squibs or whatever else, it's much easier to catch a punt or a kick where you're standing there and you have all the time in the world to look up at it than it is to catch, like a deep fade in the corner of the end zone for a game-winning touchdown. So I would like to see us play around with some of our younger guys. I'm saying I expect it. It's more, I hope we do. I think it's a logical thing, and it's because it's kick returns can be high risk, but if you can't perform at the special teams side, you're definitely not going to be able to perform as a full-on receiver. So I think hopefully some of our younger guys, hopefully some Nick Anderson kick returns. His big brother Rodney as a running back was a pretty perennial returner for us.
I don't know about that. I don't think Nick is a very different breed than Rodney is. He's a lot taller, but you never know. I won't say never, but he might be more of a possession wide receiver than our playmaker in the kickoff. But yeah, I think they'll be definitely interesting. We kind of talked in our past pods about taking the kickoff versus not and how Lincoln restricted that. We'll kind of see, but with it being the spring game, they're going to return it. And actually, wait, do they even have kickoffs in the spring game? I don't even know how Brent Venables is going to set it up. So we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if there's no kickoffs. So just kind of a thought for moving forward. I guess kind of one quick note from my end. I'll give you the floor for a one quick note from your end before we end this pod. I kind of mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, spring game is always big for recruiting. There's going to be plenty of recruits in there, but we're not going to see eyeballs. We're not going to see locks or any of these things on Twitter. But if anything big happens in terms of targets and, guys getting in that we didn't think were going to get in, kind of, become high on the OU's list, I'll talk about that next week. But one name that it looks like that TFB was talking about that's going to make it in, that's a big-time OU target at the defensive line position, is Jordan Raynaud. He is out of Tyler, Texas, and he's a high-end 4-star, and looks like he is coming in and is very high on OU, and OU is very high on him. So that's another big-time name, another defensive lineman that is very highly thought of, that is high on OU's list, something that we haven't heard from a long time. We're big on David Stone. We're hoping about him at the 24 side, and he's going to be in there as well. So we're starting to see before our eyes here, OU recruiting some defensive players now and getting some legitimacy now that we have Jay Valet at the cornerback position, Todd Bates at the defensive line, and Brent Venable is a guy who's been very well known to be a great defender, defensive coordinator as our head coach. So anything elsewise, just spring game that you want to talk about, Ty?
No. We kind of jumped into, and I think that's the nature of the spring game is just sort of position expectations for the coming season, like we talked about, with kick return and then quarterbacks not being able to be hit and running backs and not being able to go full out and everything else. It's not a perfect, indication of the season, so don't buy into too much. But like we saw last year, Caleb Williams was the most impressive quarterback in that spring game, and then we saw how it ended up. So there definitely are some lessons to be learned. In terms of recruiting, I think the more I've thought about it, I think the Venables way probably makes more sense, because it's just in trying to get people to commit during the spring game, maybe in the college football ecosystem 10 years ago made sense, or before that. But there is just so much more movement nowadays, even with recruits. And I'm, the transfer portal and everything else, once you're already playing, is a whole different beast. But some people will have very strong opinions on, how people feel about commitments to things and everything else nowadays. But it's a fact that you can go look at or go find the numbers or the articles yourself that show this. But it's a fact now that there's a lot more movement with guys that have already committed somewhere because of this big push in college football in the past decade or so, to just get people to commit earlier and earlier and earlier. And it just doesn't make sense, because people are going to continue to explore their options, and the nature of college football now with the NIL and everything else, and the ways that schools can recruit now and the things that they can say to people have changed, and it's just becoming more competitive. There's more money in it. There's more donor money in it. There's more interest in it, in recruiting and recruiting well. There's just so much stuff being thrown at these kids that, it's crazy, and you really can't expect one to make a decision. So I know a lot of people are down on us not taking commitments like we were before, and not expecting people to commit at the spring game. And like you said, no more eyeballs at the spring game. But I don't know if it's really going to make a big difference, because I think you had mentioned this earlier, Jamison, in one of the earlier podcasts, is we had that last year's spring game specifically, where we had just had a ton of eyeballs, a ton of verbal commits or lean commits and stuff, and then just nothing materialized of it. So, I don't know that it's as big of a deal as people are buying into. It's one of those, new things are scary type things, but I think the future will bear out whether or not it was the right decision. But I don't know that we can say it's a bad decision or someone being behind the curve. I think that's been a big talking point, is people thinking that Venables is sort of behind the curve when it comes to recruiting. And I think a lot of that is coming from the fact that, the Clemson program he came from is much more traditionalist, and people are expecting that to not be able to survive in the way that it does. But I don't know that we're behind the curve with this specific thing when it comes to recruiting in the spring game. But, who knows what the future holds.
Yeah, I think it's actually a good thing that we're going to be not trying to take commitments this early, because NIL deals and Bagman are going to be hitting even harder now, and last-second changes are going to hurt. So this is going to be a sprint come December in terms of, signing these kids. In April, not so much. It's just developing relationships. But if you do end up seeing commits that come from this weekend, that these kids are real ones, and getting in the boat, almost 8 months out from signing day is a huge, huge deal. So they will probably be guys that will be in our class for a long time. So no one's going to be really thinking that they are a decommitment threat, because they're not allowed to take any other visits. So just a thought process if you do see any commits coming out of this weekend. But my guess is we'll continue to get guys that are very high on us, and we'll get some more names, and they will be up on our list, and we'll be up on their list, and it'll be all good. But other than that, I think we went through everything really well. It was a little bit of a longer podcast, but that's because it's a spring game, and you guys need to hear this information. Obviously, I suggest y'all, with it being spring game, if y'all do go, even though you just heard all these names, I always just watch and I'm like, who the heck is that? Because I don't know any of the numbers yet. Make sure you pull up the directory of all the numbers on your phone. I'm pretty sure they have them on the QR code next to your seats. Pull that up, because that really helps to figure out who's who out there, because you're kind of a little bit rusty and there's so many new names. But other than that, everyone enjoy it if you're going to the game. I'm very, very sad that I'm not. This will be a lot of fun, and we will talk to y'all next week as we recap and take away the Easter eggs and the findings from this spring game? And did we figure out anything in particular that might show us some, light of how we're going to be a football team moving into this new season with a new coach? So for me and Ty, and then now Bobby, who's off this podcast, this was the Schooner Pod, and everyone have fun this coming weekend.